The front is breaking. The AFU have wrested Huliaipol from the enemy's grasp. The Russians are in panic. Starlink is disconnected. The offensive has failed. Ternovata and Chuhunivka have been cleared. Fake approaches to Pokrovsk have been exposed. Russian saboteurs have been eliminated. The Ukrainian flag flies over Pridorozhne. The AFU are pressing the occupiers on all fronts. Russia's defenses are crumbling. Crimea is facing a crisis. Prices are soaring. People are suffering. The world's second army is in a cold sweat. The AFU continues its lightning strikes. I'll tell you all the details in just a moment. Greetings, this is Ukraine Today, and I am Victoria Panchenko, and the latest events. The AFU counteroffensive is tearing through the front. Huliaipol is being wrested from the occupiers' grasp. The Russians are in a panic. Ukrainian forces coolly took advantage of the Starlink shutdown and struck at the most vulnerable moment. The Russians have no communications and panic is off the charts. Propagandist bloggers and media are spreading information about the large-scale AFU counteroffensive with wild horror. Enemy propaganda is screaming, "It's all over, they're coming." Russian media report that Ukrainians are advancing on several sections of the front at once, including the Huliaipol area. They say that the foggy weather allows our troops to slip into the enemy's rear and bypass the occupiers' positions. Moreover, it has been officially confirmed our fighters have completely cleared Ternovatoye in the Zaporizhzhia region. As usual, the enemy tried to spread a video allegedly showing the capture of the village, but the AFU quickly debunked this fake. Similarly, the clearing of Chugunovka in the Kharkiv region and the raising of the Ukrainian flag have been confirmed. The spokesperson for the Southern Defense Forces, Vladislav Voloshin, exposed Russian propaganda. The enemy's maps are nothing but lies. The Russian myth about approaching Pokrovsky in the Dnipropetrovsk region and the capture of Ternovatoye is a fake. In reality, the front line is at least 10 to 15 kilometers away, and their advances have been destroyed by our troops.
For our part, we do indeed carry out up to 24 reconnaissance and search operations daily to detect their infiltrating sabotage groups. We have conducted clearances everywhere.
After Ternovatoye, Ukrainian fighters cleared the neighboring Pridorozhne. Russian sabotage and reconnaissance groups tried to plant a flag, but only one managed to do so. The saboteurs were eliminated and the Ukrainian flag now flies over the village. The 33rd Separate Assault Regiment of the Ground Forces has clearly proven that Pridorozhne was, is, and will remain Ukrainian. The Russian army continues to push along Ukraine's northern border, but the result is zero. No breakthroughs, no effect, no success. The reason is a failure in the command system. Disruption of satellite communications. Starlink has turned the offensive into chaotic flailing. This was reported by Viktor Trehubov, a representative of the Joint Forces.
In recent days, they've had a problem with troop command after Starlink was shut off, so the intensity has decreased somewhat since the Russians now have to somehow overcome the issue with radio communications.
The situation for the occupiers is made worse by the weather. It's hard to advance and coordinating is even harder. In search of a solution, the Russians rushed to find a replacement for Starlink, but hit a dead end.
They tried to launch their own system, but it didn't work. There is a Chinese one, but it's not ready for use yet. Compared to Starlink, this model is most likely just a project or prototype, not something ready for real-world application. So in fact, the Russians have no alternative.
The result, tactical collapse. Without Starlink, the enemy has lost the ability to operate according to their basic scheme. Small assault groups under drone cover no longer work. Communication disappeared and the offensive stalled. Starlink is closed to Russia forever. Tricks with the whitelist have failed. The Russians are scrambling and trying to revive their Starlink by sneaking them into the Ukrainian whitelist. But that trick won't work. All the schemes were calculated in advance. Traps have been set. This was stated directly by the communication systems specialist and advisor to the Minister of Defense, Sergei Flash Beskresnov.
Of course, the enemy is looking for ways to activate Starlink. They write their ideas in groups, and then these posts circulate in our groups as well. All their ideas are banal. Send someone to the Administrative Services Center for money. Use a fake company, remove a Starlink from a captured drone, and so on. Don't worry, we anticipated all these options in advance and considered both the risks and countermeasures.
The verdict is tough. All Russian Starlinks that appear in the Ukrainian whitelist will be instantly blocked. And for those who decide to make money by helping the enemy, there's a direct path to prison.
This isn't like setting a car on fire and running away. This is about coming to the Administrative Services Center and essentially recording your crime for the court. So my advice to traitors is, don't even try.
The enemy isn't easing up the pressure, but the Ukrainian armed forces don't stop for a minute. The front is cracking, the defense is collapsing, and the world's second army is once again drenched in cold sweat. The retribution of the Ukrainian armed forces is gaining momentum, and this is just the beginning. In detail about what is happening on the line of contact and how the Ukrainian armed forces are striking at the enemy's rear. More on this in our review.
Revenge for Kiev and all of Ukraine. Belgorod takes up the blackout baton. The governor of Belgorod urges not to strike Kiev and other Ukrainian cities anymore, because after that, retaliation follows, and the air defense can't cope with it.
According to the governor of Belgorod region, more than 500 apartment buildings are currently without heating in Belgorod. Moreover, the Luch boiler house and a number of other strategic enterprises in the Belgorod region have been put out of operation. These facilities primarily supply the Russian military-industrial complex and accordingly the permanent bases of Russian army personnel with heat and electricity.
The defense forces are gradually and confidently striking strategic targets of the enemy. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine reports that Ukrainians struck a command post of a Russian airborne forces unit near Sudza in the Kursk region. Ukrainian defenders also attacked a Russian ammunition depot in the temporarily occupied territories of Kherson region. In addition, the destruction of 6,000 FPV drones and components as well as damage to several containers with drones has been confirmed as a result of a strike on a UAV depot in the Rostov region. In this footage, F-16 fighter jets are epically destroying an enemy shied over Ukraine. The village of Ternovati in Zaporizhzhia has been completely cleared of occupiers, according to Ukrainian soldiers.
In the Zaporizhzhia direction, Ukraine's defense forces carried out a series of successful controlled withdrawal operations at the junction of the Zaporizhzhia and Dnipropetrovsk regions. 2 settlements have been liberated, and there is further advancement deeper into the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine.
Russian troops are advancing in the area of Tike, Kharkiv region, according to deep state analysts.
It should be noted that in the Kharkiv region, specifically in the Kupiansk direction, Ukraine's defense forces have achieved tactical successes. The deoccupation of the settlement of Zarizovo represents significant tactical successes by our defenders. There has also been a noted increase in activity by the occupiers in the Vovchansk direction.
Advances have also been recorded in a number of settlements in the Bakhmut and Pokrovsk districts of Donetsk region. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent stated that Europe is buying refined petroleum products made from Russian oil and is prioritizing trade over supporting Ukraine.
At present, there has indeed been an increase in the purchase of liquefied gas and petroleum products. A number of European countries, primarily France, are involved. In addition, European countries have purchased more than $700 million worth of seafood from the Russian Federation. And Bessent's statement is a harsh assessment of the actions of European countries. In other words, this is essentially about European states financially supporting the active phase of military operations against our country.
Ukrainian intelligence officers have published information about 21 enterprises. These are involved in the development and production of unmanned systems used by the aggressor state in the war against Ukraine. More than half of them are still not under sanctions from any of the countries in the sanctions coalition, which allows the aggressor to freely obtain technologies, components, and funding, as noted by the GUR.
In the Crimea annexed by Russia, prices for food and basic goods have soared. The war and the economic crisis in Russia are fueling inflation. The most vulnerable citizens are suffering the most. What is happening today on the occupied peninsula and how are the locals reacting to it? All the details are in our report.
Noticeable changes in prices at grocery stores in Crimea, annexed by Russia, were observed at the beginning of the year.
Can someone explain to me why food is so expensive in Crimea?
Starting January 1st, the Russian authorities increased the value-added tax rate, which triggered a rise in prices for almost everything.
The only thing is, they are trying to reassure people, trying to say that the VAT changes were necessary measures, that it was... Now things will settle down, and in principle, the situation there will improve. The rate of price growth will decrease by 2.6%. But despite all that, you understand this is already manipulation on the part of politicians when they start talking about a decrease in the rate of price increases.
Crimeans are actively filming videos in stores and complaining about rising prices.
Have you even seen the prices for dairy products? Milk is 113 rubles, yogurt is 102 rubles, savushkin is 91 rubles, cream cheese is 185 rubles. It's also hard to make sense of the prices for fruits and vegetables. Potatoes are 50 rubles, cabbage is 22 rubles, beets are 29 rubles per kilogram. A kilogram of apples cost me 210 rubles, eggs are 95 rubles. Chicken breast fillet is 469 rubles per kilogram.
The rise in prices in Crimea hits pensioners first and foremost. In this footage, blogger Elena Gukova from Yalta talks about the significant rise in prices not only for food but also for medicines.
The very last time that I actually bought rosuvastatin was back in the year 2025. It cost 195 rubles. Well, I certainly didn't expect the price to go up this much. I actually thought that medicine prices wouldn't increase. After all, these are medicines. You can't live without them. So I went to the pharmacy and just look at the price now. 250 rubles. The cheapest things were the chocolate bars. They used to cost rubles. 79, I think. Those were the cheapest chocolate bars. Now they cost 200 rubles. 200 rubles. So the price has doubled.
At the moment, the inflation rate in annexed Crimea exceeds the average for Russia. The inflation index has reached almost 107%. For Crimea, higher inflation has been a persistent trend throughout all the years of annexation. Experts, however, are convinced that the real level of inflation in Crimea may be significantly higher than the officially reported figure. The head of the Crimean Tatar Resource Center, Eskander Bariev, explains that prices have indeed risen for almost all categories of goods. And it's not just food products.
Prices for dairy products have gone up. The quality of dairy products has decreased. Then prices for bread and bakery products have also increased. Building materials are expensive. For example, construction is very costly. And
this price increase was influenced not only by the rise in VAT, there are a number of other reasons as well. One of the main issues is logistics. The lack of air connections, overloaded railways, and the prioritization of military transport directly affect the cost of services.
Crimea has always been subsidized. And moreover, when we talk about logistics, it means that products have to be delivered to Crimea. Building materials have to be delivered to Crimea. During Ukrainian times, this was, of course, done by rail, by transport from Ukraine, from the mainland part of Ukraine. And so logistics were much simpler, but prices were also different.
An additional factor was Russia's war against Ukraine. The media reports that Crimea has become overloaded with military personnel, and mobilization and contract campaigns are creating a direct financial burden on local budgets.
There, all sorts of explanations start to be given. Some people say that this is related in connection with this special military operation. It is clear that additional spending on the army is necessary right now, and so on.
The rise in prices was also affected by strikes on oil depots in Crimea.
First of all, there were serious problems due to the explosions at the oil depots. And when prices for gasoline went up and when there simply was no gasoline, that also had an impact. And it also affected, let's say, the production sector. This influenced things like, for example, when the harvest was being gathered in the fall and so on. In other words, logistical issues.
Russia's oil and gas revenues are declining. Most regional budgets are becoming deficit-ridden, and Crimea continues to exist solely thanks to federal subsidies. Given the overall economic problems in Russia, a further decline in the standard of living is also forecasted for subsidized Crimea.
Crimea is a subsidized region, Without external support, it is quite difficult for Crimea to survive. Therefore, much here will depend on the overall economic condition of the Russian Federation itself. And we see that due to the sanctions policy, due to the budget deficit, and due to the fact that, indeed, since February, we have already been receiving less. The budget is facing serious problems due to issues with the sale of oil and gas, the main source for the Russian Federation. And therefore, of course, this will also apply to and affect Crimea as well. I don't think we can talk about any improvement here. And
This kind of incredibly difficult and harsh life begins to take hold in every single place where Russia sets foot.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
The era of the Kadyrovs in Chechnya has come to an end, and hatred in Chechnya could erupt after Kadyrov's death. How this threatens the Kremlin, you'll understand in a moment.
The end of power. The TikTok ruler Kadyrov is losing his position. Assalamu alaikum.
Greetings to everyone. It's me again once more with my phone.
The health of the head of Chechnya has been rapidly deteriorating, and this has immediately affected the appearance of Putin's vassal. From being athletic, muscular, and self-confident, Kadyrov is turning into a helpless, constantly tired, and sick old man. The head of Chechnya has been seriously ill for several years, as evidenced by his unhealthy appearance and regular disappearances from the public eye. He stopped working out, which always played a big role in his image, and started wearing looser, baggier clothes. And Don has also started appearing in public less often. Although before, he always loved being the center of attention. Salam
Alaikum. Here we go again. Interesting life. Life in general can be interesting.
In simple terms, Kadyrov doesn't have much time left. His reign is apparently coming to an end.
They began with repression in Chechnya itself. For this reason, raising the topic of poor health in public space was completely prohibited. Kadyrov. And people are now in such a state that they are truly afraid to express their own opinions. But do they talk about it, let's say, in their kitchens, so to speak? Yes, absolutely. There are quite a few clans in Chechnya. Yes, most of them are in one way or another affiliated with the Kadyrov clan.
Who will replace Don? The question remains open. Essentially, the main successor is considered to be Kadyrov's son, 18-year-old Adam. But a barrier to his election is the constitutional restriction, which stipulates that the head of Chechnya must be over 30 years old. Another possible option is appointing a person loyal to Kadyrov as the head of Chechnya. In
Moscow, as far as we can tell right now, again, by analyzing the public sphere, there are their own candidates to replace Kadyrov. But for now, other options are still being considered as viable, and at the same time, they are looking for a person who, on the one hand, understands the local specifics, and on the other hand, is closely connected, let's say, has close working relations, primarily with the FSB line, and who can build exactly a Putin-centric position. In other words, to continue doing exactly what Kadyrov was doing.
This is Moscow's main requirement for Ramzan Kadyrov's successor. Chechnya must not become a problem again, especially during the war with Ukraine.
Now it is highly probable that in the near future, Moscow will do everything humanly possible to systematically suppress and dismantle any forms of civic engagement or public actions by the local population in Chechnya. This includes any, let's say, determined attempts by the region of Chechnya to finally gain its own independent legal subjectivity and political autonomy. This strategy involves the heavy-handed use of force, including the implementation of extremely violent crackdowns and military interventions against the people.
What will happen next in Chechnya is unknown. Some political analysts believe that Kadyrov's death could lead to a power struggle among clans and to mass protests.
This could cause major destabilization in the North Caucasus, basically because there is already tension between Chechnya and Dagestan and between Chechnya and Ingushetia. And of course, when Kadyrov dies, this confrontation could sharply intensify. And all the grievances that Chechnya's neighbors have had could be brought up again. That's why destabilization in this region is very, very likely.
According to the Institute for the Study of War, the death of the Chechen dictator or his departure from office, if this happens during or immediately after the end of the war in Ukraine, could leave Putin's interests unprotected. Deep within the complex geopolitical landscape of the North Caucasus region, the situation remains incredibly volatile and uncertain, unless he takes the decisive step to appoint a truly appropriate and highly capable successor who can maintain stability and order throughout the entire territory for the foreseeable future.